And our recording is live now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Mishi, and I'm the Program Manager for the Geriatric Social Work Initiative at the Gerontological Society of America. I'm happy to welcome you today to Thinking Inside the Box, a strategic approach to message-driven posters. Our presenter today is John Beilenson, President of Strategic Communications and Planning, and he has been a consultant for the John A. Hartford Foundation grantees for many years and has been instructing not only social work scholars but those in nursing and medicine as well. So the GSWI is thrilled to be able to bring John's expertise to the larger gerontology community with today's webinar. Before introducing John, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the webinar features that we'll be using today. So if you would just take a moment to look at your screen and notice that it's currently divided. In the larger viewing window right now, you should see the slide presentation for today's webinar. To the right of your screen, you should see the discussion window. If you would like to change the view so that the slide presentation is larger, simply put your cursor over the dividing line between the slides and this discussion window. Click and pull the line to the right to enlarge the slide window. Now, today we're going to be using several features of the Lotus Live software for questions and answers. So please listen carefully, as these instructions may be slightly different for those accessing the audio via the web only. So first, if you're joining our audio discussion through the use of a phone line, as I've instructed previously, please be sure to mute your phone line now. And if you do not have a mute key on your phone, you may select *6 to mute and unmute your phone manually. Whether you're joining us via phone or solely through the web portal, you may choose to use the chat feature to send questions to the call leaders throughout today's presentation. To access this chat feature, you need to click on the discussion bubble located at the top part of the discussion window, which is on the right hand of your screen. After you click on this discussion bubble, you may submit a question by locating the box in the lower right-hand side of your screen, just below the drop-down menu that allows you to select a recipient. Insert your question in this box below the drop-down menu and hit send. Please note that you do not need to select a recipient. Your question is going to go directly to a moderator who will be compiling questions during today's webinar. Also, please note that your message will not be seen by other participants. The chat feature is only being enabled to allow messages to be sent directly to the moderator for today's webinar. One last feature you will notice is a raise hand function. For those of you who have joined the audio portion of the call using your phone line, you may use the raise hand function to indicate that you have a question or comment throughout today's discussion. So please click on the raise hand button, which should be on the top left-hand corner of your screen, and wait to be called on for your question or comment. I hope this information will be helpful to you during today's webinar. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenter, John Beilenson. Throughout his life, John Beilenson has been inspired by the power of the printed and, more recently, the electronic mode. The grandson of the founders of Peter Pauper Press, a small printing and publishing company in Westchester County, New York, he completed the intensive Radcliffe Publishing Procedures course after college and was poised to serve as the third generation of Beilensons to run the family business. Instead, a friend recommended him for a public affairs job in New York City government, and during the next 20 years, he went on to work for or with a wide range of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and foundations, and to help these groups use communications for social good. He earned his master's in communication studies from UNC Chapel Hill and founded the North Carolina Media Institute, which trained grassroots environmental activists in advocacy and communication skills. Today, John is president of Strategic Communications and Planning, a full-service socially responsible consulting firm in Wayne, Pennsylvania, with specialties on both ends of the age spectrum, children and older adults. In the aging field, SCP's clients include the National Council on Aging, the John A. Hartford Foundation, Grant Makers in Aging, the AARP Foundation, the American Federation for Aging Research, and the Gerontological Society of America, among many others. So without further delay now, John, I'm going to actually pass the presenter rights along to you and let you get started with your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Julia, again, thank you to the Gerontological Society and to the Geriatric Social Work Initiative for having me and for welcoming all of you and inviting all of you to join us for this PowerPoint and webinar. During the next hour and a half or so, we will be talking about what I like to call a strategic approach to powerful and to message-driven posters. And hopefully you'll have a chance to not only sort of learn from what I'm talking about, but also to learn from your colleagues and from some of the examples that I'll get a chance to show as we go forward. Today, again, this is we'll be doing this discussion in a number of different pieces, and again, we're always very focused on sort of an interactive presentation, and so the presentation today will take place beginning with a sort of a brief discussion of sort of how I and we got interested at SCP, got interested in posters and applying sort of a different point of view to scientific posters. We'll then sort of review some of the basics of strategic communications and give you a sort of an overview of what we mean by sort of breaking down a variety of communications challenges in a strategic way. We'll then take a look at a poster exercise that will ask you to think about your next poster session and to think on the sort of the objective, the audience, and the message. And hopefully, I'm pretty sure you have received in the last day or so an email with a worksheet that you perhaps might have already begun to take a look at. And we're hoping that you'll be able to join in, and we'll have some volunteers to talk through a little bit of your own sort of objectives, messages, audiences, and messages. And finally, we have three of your colleagues. We've chosen three of your colleagues who have volunteered to present posters here for the group, and will enable us to kind of talk about them and to provide some constructive feedback and help them improve their posters as they get ready for their next poster session, perhaps at the GSA meeting in Boston in November. So that's where we're headed in the next, and we'll also take a look at some exemplars of good posters that we've developed through our work with the John A. Hartford Foundation and the various scholars programs that the foundation supports. So that's sort of where we're headed. Again, as Julia had mentioned, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or to send a chat to the group. And then that way we can answer that and make sure that we're responding to your questions and to your concerns as we go forward. But it seems like everybody is online and ready to go. So let's just get started. So strategies and posters. For a number of years, we've been, and actually since the beginning of our work with nonprofit organizations, foundations, government agencies at SCP, we have used a sort of a strategic approach to communications, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And because of that sort of perspective, in a number of places, when I started my career, particularly back in the 90s, I spent a lot of time actually going and looking at posters, sometimes that look something like this, although perhaps not exactly like this, in various meetings at GSA or at AGS or at the American Federation for Aging Research. And I was often kind of baffled by these posters. Now, of course, I'm not trained as a scientist. I got my master's, as Julia noted, from the University of North Carolina in communication studies. It's not surprisingly for a communications consultant. So I didn't necessarily understand the science, but from a communications point of view, I often didn't understand sort of why posters were developed the way they were and why they looked the way they did. And back in the day, many of the posters sort of looked like this one, where each of these gray boxes here, or the white boxes, were really a single 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper with maybe a background behind it, set up in a way sort of very much like a concentration board in sort of rows and columns. And more recently, though, similarly, they've been set up in ways that were equally sort of baffling to me, where there was, perhaps lots of text and information presented in ways that were not particularly visual or not easy to see for a group of people in a poster session where there were a group of people wandering up and down a set of aisles and in a way where one's concentration was not always focused on a particular or any one poster or one piece of information, as it would when we're, say, reading an article in a journal or something like that. So, I started kind of thinking about this and looking at these posters, and I started, as sometimes I want, sort of raving to whoever might listen about the fact that I just didn't think the posters made a lot of communication sense, and that if we were going to really take a strategic approach to this, what would we really try to, how would we really kind of do something more effective, and it would help people kind of communicate more effectively about this very important research that they were doing. And so I was raving to this geriatrician, Tom Gill, who is from Yale University, one day at a meeting of the Beeson Physician Faculty Scholars Program, which is a mid-career fellowship program sponsored by NIA now and initially by the John A. Hartford Foundation and others. And Tom, I think maybe to get me to stop talking and perhaps leave him alone at breakfast, eventually agreed to develop a poster with me and say, okay, John, well, next year's Beeson meeting, well, I'll develop a specific kind of a special kind of communications poster with you, and we'll see if we can test out some of your ideas. So again, about 11 and a half months after Tom and I had that breakfast, he sent me this poster. And again, as I noted, it didn't look exactly like this. It was really on 8.5 by 11-inch pieces of paper. Each of these boxes, was a separate page. And he said, okay, this is the paper I did. This is the poster I did for AGS. What would you do if you were going to turn it into a more effective communications poster? So I said, okay, great. Well, I had never done a poster, my scientific poster myself, but I said to myself, okay, we're thinking about strategy, and again, the strategic communications approach is one of the things that made me initially realize that these posters didn't seem to make much sense, at least as they were generally configured. And so I said, well, what we should do is let's talk about a strategic approach to communications and a strategic approach to your poster. So that strategic approach had a number of different elements to it, and we'll go through each of these briefly. First of all, it's setting sort of clear objectives, knowing where you're headed, what you're trying to achieve. The second is to kind of know your environment, sort of the environment in which the communications is taking place. In this case, a poster session, oftentimes in a large room with a lot of other posters next to it. The third thing is to identify your audiences, your audience, and particularly your target audience, who you want to communicate with, and to what end. Then to create and adapt messages that make sense to the audience in particular, and kind of connect to their values and their interests. And then finally, or almost finally, to select a series of vehicles or strategies that take the message to the audience, that make sense of the environment, and that ultimately help you develop your objectives or serve your objectives or achieve your objectives. And then finally, the last step is to conduct evaluation, to see how you did, because again, as in all of our work, we want to kind of improve that. We want to continue to improve the effort, and by conducting evaluation, that can help us get better as we go forward. So let's talk a little bit about this point of view, this strategic approach to communications. First thing is setting objectives. So I like this New Yorker cartoon, a couple of fish talking as only a couple of fish can talk in a New Yorker cartoon. One saying to the other, I want the whole package, the little bowl, the colored pebbles, the plastic castle. And in fact, that is, I think, a perfect example of sort of when we think about our communications and sort of what we're trying to achieve, sort of what often happens is we think very broadly, and we kind of have sort of a very general or even a fuzzy sense of sort of what we're trying to achieve. And in order to be strategic, though, we really need to think much smarter. And again, this comes from the folks at Spitfire Strategies in Washington, D.C., and they suggest that communication objectives should be written in such a way that, and conceived in such a way that they're specific, right, that they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're time-bounded. Specific so that they have a level of sort of detail so that you know who it is that you're trying to communicate with, and that you know what you want to do with those folks. Measurable in so much as that you would know by the end of the day or the end of the period in which you're doing this communication activity that you would know whether or not you were successful. Attainable in so much as it's something that could be done in that period of time and seemed reasonable. Realistic in so much as it's something that is both in scope and in terms of your ability to your skills and ability and your networks, you're realistically able to achieve that objective. And finally, it's time bounded. So it's not something that's going to happen over the course of maybe 5 years or 10 years or a month or 2 months, but it's really going to take place over a particular period of time, which might be 1 month or 3 months or even during the course of a particular poster session. So those are that's sort of an example of in terms of setting objectives. An example to go kind of from fuzzy, if you will, to smart is to think about making a successful presentation about my research at the next GSA meeting in November. So that seems like a perfectly sort of fine objective, if you will, for what you're trying to achieve through a poster session, but or at GSA. But a smarter objective and perhaps a more helpful objective would be something like, in preparation for, participation in, and follow-up to the 2011 GSA annual meeting, I want to connect with 5 key academic leaders, there are 5 of them, and who would then do what? Provide constructive feedback and or support to my research agenda. Okay, so that's a much more specific and much smarter objective in the model that we just described. And it enables you, again, as I noted earlier, to focus your attention and your communications in a particular way, and one that makes really much more sense given what it is you're trying to achieve. Okay, so that's the first part of the strategic approach to communications, setting an objective and setting a smart objective. The second piece is to think about the environment and make sense of the environment. So depending on the communication that you're doing, it may take place in some place that's actually quite sort of solitary. So, for example, when you're putting a paper together and and that's being read by people online, it's in a fairly quiet sort of environment. Right, or if you're doing a presentation, people may be sitting there, and it may be relatively quiet in the place where you're giving that presentation. Or it may be something a little different. It may be like this sort of whitewater rafting where things are moving all over the place, and the people are moving, and there's lots of distractions. And so it may be taking place, in the beginning of the day, or it may be taking place right before lunch when people are hungry and not in a very good mood, or it may be taking place in the evening when people might be getting cocktails, and this oftentimes happens in a poster session. So you need to think about sort of the environment in which your poster is going to be presented. In fact, in the environment in which any of your communications, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a teaching opportunity, a presentation in a local, in a local community center, or even, working with the media or in some other way to get your message out more broadly. So you want to make sure you're smart about your objectives and you think it like an environmentalist. you also want to figure out your audience. Now, if you've done a good job with your objective, you should have a pretty clear sense of your audience. So let's go back to that other slide here. So the audience here is pretty clear for the SMART objective is 5 key academic leaders, okay? But you want to make sure that, again, that you're very clear about who it is that you want to talk with in the context of the poster session or whatever communications that you're developing. And you want to get as clear a sense of who they are and what they are as possible. Now, this group of folks is not likely the audience that you're going to see at the GSA meeting or at your next poster session, but it was the audience that I saw when I decided to coach my son's first grade Little League team. And I was, a traditional American dad, very interested in transmitting, this group of American games and the knowledge that I had developed about baseball over the course of several decades, and actually played baseball in high school and after college, et cetera. And so I was just very excited to kind of bring all this hard-won wisdom to bear on this impressionable group of kids. Now, when I got to the first practice, I was presented with a group that was, like this, which is that they were incredibly cute, but as you can likely guess, they had the attention span of a swarm of gnats. And I was also, I very quickly understood that they didn't know very much about baseball. In fact, one of the first things I said was to kind of talk about running to first base and practice to run at first base. So I said, the first question I asked was sort of, let's run to first base. And 2 kids ran to first base, 2 kids ran to third base, and the rest of the kids kind of looked at the 2 groups and tried to figure out which one of the groups was correct. So I realized very quickly that my messaging and my approach had to change dramatically in order to be effective given my audience and sort of what their needs were. So I did a number of things. First of all, instead of doing a practice that was an hour and a half long, I shortened them to 45 or 50 minutes at a time, which is about all the kids could take, and then I sent them to the playground where they had a lot of fun and built their coordination and muscles and all that kind of good stuff as well. The second thing I did was I started breaking down the practices into 5-minute chunks so that I would make sense of their attention span or their lack thereof, and so that I could keep them moving from one thing to the next and keep them interested as we were going. And then I broke down the messages and the actual drills into very, very simple, and the component skills I was trying to teach into very simple pieces. So, for example, I wanted to teach kids to kind of watch the bat hit the ball. This kind of that traditional bromide that all coaches tell their players. But I realized that my son, when I first started playing with him, that I would kind of show him the ball. I said, Jacob, watch the ball. I'd throw the ball. By the time I had thrown the ball, he was looking over to the side to the weeds. So what I did was I colored a number of balls, different colors, took the bat out of the boys' hands, and which is always a good idea with 7-year-olds. And we played a game where they would pretend to bat, and I would throw them the ball. And the exercise was to shout out the color of the ball that they had seen. So they not only helped to learn their colors, but it also helped them learn how to watch the ball. And from then we kind of built from there and put a bat in their hands and tried to help them become reasonably good hitters. So I just tell that story because, A, I like to show this picture, and these kids are incredibly cute, and I like to show off my son who is now 14, is about 5'10", is much less cute, although than he is now, but hopefully has become a little bit more mature than the boy with his tongue sticking out here. But it does go to, again, I think, to explicate what I mean by the need to identify your audience and then to make sense of that audience in your presentation and in how you approach, again, in this case, a poster, to make sense of what the audience really needs, what they want, what they expect. Okay? So we talked about objective, we talked about the environment, we've talked about audiences. The next thing we need to talk about in terms of strategic approach is to create a message. Now, I like this New Yorker cartoon. If you were to boil your book down to a few words, what would be its message? And indeed, that's really what the essence of messaging is about. It's the distillation of a complex piece of research, in your case, into a sentence or set of sentences that describes what it is that you want to say to your audience in simple, concise kind of terms. Okay, and so that's sort of the main intent of messaging, or the main pieces of messaging. But there's also a number of things that you want to think about when you're thinking about creating a message so that your messages are effective. The first thing you really want to focus on is sort of reducing sort of the complexity of your messaging, and because in fact you are working on complex pieces of research. And again, oftentimes, especially at a place like GSA, there's going to be a fairly diverse audience that you're likely going to be showing your poster to. And by simplifying the language, not dumbing it down, but making it simple and engaging, you reduce the barriers to folks engaging in your work. Similarly, we all have sort of a particular kind of jargon in our discipline or in our field, and making sure to kind of try to really eliminate that jargon so that you can, again, make the poster and make your message more broadly understandable and more easily engaged is really important. And in the same way, sort of trying to kind of find concrete terms and concrete language as opposed to abstract or conceptual language that creates a sort of a sense of opacity so that when people kind of look at and quickly try to read your poster language, or listen to a presentation, for example, they don't have there isn't language that catches their attention and enables them to sort of form visual pictures, concrete pictures in their mind. So trying to be more concrete, trying to paint pictures with your words creates a way of sort of engaging folks, as does kind of appealing to people's emotion, whether it's in trying to inspire people, or their fear, or their empathy, or trying to attract their empathy. Again, trying to infuse some emotion into the communication, even if it is a scientific communication, and which doesn't place a huge premium on emotion. Trying to connect with people through their sense of concern for your target population or your research topic is a way of helping them care about why it is they should pay attention to your research, and why they should spend some time to talk with you at the poster session. And finally, the last challenge is you want to make sure, even while you try to kind of make something more approachable and more emotionally engaging and more concrete, you do want to be careful that you don't hit the wrong message. And again, I love this New Yorker cartoon of this guy who's clearly sending a very powerful, very distinctive message, but it's sort of off key and not probably the one that that you certainly don't want to be sending in a poster session, but except for a Halloween party, it's probably not a message that you're trying to send anyway. So again, message. We talked about objective. We talked about environment, audience, message. The last step in the process is really identifying or choosing the vehicles, the strategies, the tactics that take your message to the audience in the service of your objectives. Now, normally when you're doing, you have an objective, a communications objective, a variety of communications vehicles may be appropriate. In this case, we're really going to just be talking about a poster, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But depending on your objective, you're going to have a variety of either pros or cons, and it may be either that you need to reach a lot of people and it's expensive, and so email might be a very good option, or you have a small audience and you're really trying to get them to do something significant, so you need something like a telephone call or a face-to-face meeting to engage people, or you're trying to build sort of something. Greater awareness with policymakers or with clinicians, and again, some of these other pieces like a research paper or a poster, or again, even some of the social media and website and other pieces symposium may be more appropriate. But again, each of them have pros and cons. Each of them require resources, particularly your time, and so you'll want to, as you think about your objective, what you're trying to achieve, you'll try to figure out what are the most effective things to do, given, again, your budget, your time, and most particularly your objective and your audience. So what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then making the decision about how you're going to go and try to achieve that. When we think about our posters, the posters are a kind of vehicle and a way of kind of communicating something, and a poster session is a kind of vehicle. And it has a number of characteristics. First of all, it's your vehicle, right? So you have control over the message, which is great, and you don't have to depend on other people to translate it for you, as you would in the media or in some other kind of more mediated vehicles. It's also in a large visual format, so that actually is both an opportunity because you can communicate, in a visual way and in kind of striking ways through that format. But it also means that you have to be able to master that format and the graphic design elements that are part of that format. The third and the fourth bullets, kind of point to the environment, which suggests that, first of all, there are lots of other posters in a poster session usually, and so it's competitive. So you're trying to figure out a way to grab people's attention and to get them to stop, and that's made even more difficult by the fact that the audience isn't sort of sitting behind a desk or seated in an auditorium, but in fact they're on the move. So that actually has an impact on how you might design a poster as well. And then finally, the objective for most of you will be to start some kind of conversation. And again, engagement is likely, some kind of engagement to some end is likely a critical objective for you in the poster session. This is not a mini paper. It may have lots of some of the same elements as a paper, but it actually takes place in a fundamentally different kind of environment and oftentimes has the opportunity for a face-to-face sort of connection that isn't really what you would expect initially, at least from a paper. So it's quite different from that. So that kind of gives you a sense of sort of the poster as a vehicle. And finally, you want to conduct an evaluation of your strategy and your strategic approach to a poster or communication. And again, if you've set up your objective correctly, then you should be in good shape because you'll be able to. You should have a very clear sense about whether you've been successful or not, and you can then, in your own mind or with others, you can talk about sort of how to do better the next time. So again, that gives you, a sense of this sort of a strategic approach to communications, and that, in fact, was what I showed to Tom Gill. So what I did was I asked him, so Tom, what was your objective? Who's your target audience, and what's your main message? And I'll talk about that just in a second, but it would be great. What I would like you all to do is to pull out the worksheet that was sent to you just the other day, which kind of came from Strategic Communications and Planning and from Julia Mishi. Thank you, Julia. And what I'd like you to do is to spend a minute or so or two, if you haven't already, to kind of scribble a couple things down on this page to kind of to first of all describe sort of what the objective for your poster, and second to identify a target audience and the main target audience for the poster session, and then your main message. So I'm going to stop talking for about a minute. If folks have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I can call on you, or you can just sort of get to work, and then I'll call for volunteers in just a minute or two. Okay. So again, this is just meant to sort of model a little bit about sort of how one would go about sort of thinking about a poster or a strategic poster. And I think the main point of this is, again, is not necessarily to kind of, and we'll talk a little bit about each of these things about setting up a SMART objective and a target audience and a message, et cetera. But the point is really to spend some time before you actually start putting your poster together to figure out what it is you're trying to achieve. And if you can figure out your objective in your audience and you can really hone your message, then that sets up sort of the intellectual foundation, if you will, for putting your poster together. So is someone interested in volunteering and reading their objective, their audience, and or their message?
John, I'll just remind people that those who are on the phone could use the raise hand function, which is in the left upper corner of their screen if they want to comment here.
Okay.
And it looks like we have one volunteer.
Great. Let's see. Who is that? That's Crystal. Can you so tell us a little bit about your objective, audience, and message? If you have to get off of mute first.
Yeah, *6 to unmute your phone, Crystal, if you're joining us by phone. Let's see. Crystal, you could also chat with us by using that chat feature and clicking on the discussion bubble, because we're not able to hear you for some reason.
Yeah, if you're doing through the streaming, you may not have a microphone enabled or something. I'm not sure.
And while we're waiting on Crystal, maybe we have someone else who would volunteer to share their message.
Thank you, Julie. All right. Let's see. Who we got here? Okay, so Carrie writes, to meet and engage other researchers in my research area. Okay, so and again, Crystal, you just gave us one as well. So, Carrie, can you tell us a little? So she wants to meet and engage other researchers in my research area. So how many other researchers do you think you'd be able to meet during a particular poster session? Let's see. Maybe 5 or so. Okay, so you want to meet and engage 5 other researchers in your research area, and let's see. So, and then what exactly would you like them to do? What would success look like after you've engaged those folks? Would you? So yeah, what kind of feedback or what would you be able to do when you're or what would happen after these meetings? Let's see, to help me explain my findings in relation to other areas or help with future research ideas. So I think that's a good objective. And again, but I think even going through this little sort of exercise, actually helps us kind of figure out what a sort of a smarter or more specific objective might look like. Let's see. So why don't we go back to Crystal for just a second? Crystal, can you tell us you want to get feedback on a research agenda from 5 academic leaders in GSA? Okay, that's good. And so can you tell us a little bit about these 5 academic leaders, maybe in terms of your target audience? Let's try to be a little bit more specific than that. Can you type that in? Okay, so I'm sorry, university, academia, conducting research related to disability and older adults. Okay, good. And so, when we're talking about academic leaders, we're probably talking about folks that have a good deal of experience in the field, right? And that you know, that might be slightly older, perhaps. I mean, but although, you know, who knows? And again, okay, I think that's a good audience. Let's talk about message for a second. Let's see, Crystal, what would you like to say to that audience? And Bernadette, we'll get to you in just a second. We see your hand raised. Bernadette, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Okay, good. So when we finish with Crystal, I'll come to you.
Okay.
So the intervention I have been studying, which is line dancing, can be effective in reducing disability. So that's very good. So again, I think I'm not sure about your typing here, Crystal, but it's basically your message is that line dancing can be effective in reducing disability. Again, that's quite a simple message, and I think quite a good one as well. And again, I have a picture of what line dancing is, and I have a sense of sort of how it might be helpful in reducing disability. So that's quite good. So you're going to try to engage. You get feedback on your research agenda from 5 academic leaders in GSA, so that you'll be able to get help with future research. And what you're trying to say to folks is that line dancing can be effective in reducing disability. And again, as I just described, you're trying to find a way for other people to provide feedback to you. So Bernadette, why don't you talk out loud about your objective?
To get feedback from experts in dementia about these our fit kits to increase activities for people with dementia.
I'm sorry. So
it's called, our program that we studied is called Fit Kits, and it's a tool to help enhance activities for people with dementia and their family caregivers. Okay.
And so you want to get feedback on the Fit Kits from 5 experts?
Yeah, from people who are experts in dementia care and activities for people with dementia.
Great. So you have a pretty clear sense of the audience, right?
Yeah.
And what is the message that you're trying to convey to those folks?
Our message is that we found the Fit Kits to be a helpful way to enhance activities and interaction for people with dementia and their families.
Okay, so that they've been helpful, and so I think that's actually a very good, straightforward message. And you might think about sort of, well, how could I say that more dynamically, right? So how could I make that a little shorter? How could I use a metaphor, for example? Like a Fit Kit is like what for families with dementia? It's sort of like a first aid kit it's like it's everything you need in a single place, again, some kind of way of kind of comparing the Fit Kit to something else.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
Great. So that's good. So, Bernadette, I think you've got a pretty good, clear sense of what it is you're trying to achieve, the audience you're trying to communicate with, and again, the beginnings of quite a good message.
Thank you.
And the reason it's important to kind of think about that message is because we're going to turn our attention pretty quickly to the posters. And again, being clear and understanding what that message is really important in order to enable you to decide what's most important in your poster. Because what I'll shortly be saying, and this is sort of one of the main messages from this session that I want to leave you with, is that once you know what your message is, you want to make that message easily seen, and you want to then design visually around that main message. And I'll talk a little bit about how we might do that as we go through the poster sort of review. All right, any other questions or anybody else that would like to sort of jump in and talk about their objective audience or message? All right. Excellent. Oh, and I got a message from Crystal saying, oh, Crystal's message around getting feedback on the research agenda would be for your dissertation. So that's perfect. So that's exactly what you're trying to. It makes perfect sense to have a poster to kind of engage some of the leaders in the field to get that feedback. That makes a lot of sense. So let's turn our attention now back to Tom Gill and to the poster. So our objective in developing this poster, of course, and his objective was to sort of demonstrate how a new kind of poster might be possible, and that might be more effective from a communications point of view. The audience was a sort of and to get sort of feedback from 5 and maybe even 10 folks at this Beeson Scholars meeting that year. And then the objective, the message was, the audience, was a group of sort of multidisciplinary physicians, many of whom had, all of whom had experience with posters, but had a particular way of doing them. And finally, the message was, a more message-driven sort of poster and poster format is possible and actually can communicate more sort of effectively. Now, so it's not a typical sort of set, objective audience or message, but again, that's sort of what we were working with here. And so Tom kind of listened to my spiel, went through the worksheet that you all just went through, and then started, with our help, started to redesign the poster so that eventually, after I guess it's about 3 iterations in over 2 weeks, we got to a poster that looked like this. And so what I'd like to do is to ask if there are, ask folks, what's sort of different. And you can either raise your hand or chat or even call out, I guess. We can even try that. Let's see. I'm sorry. Oh, it's Carrie notes that it's more visually appealing. Bernadette says that there are colors and there are pictures. And Crystal notes that the visual images are larger and kept to one side of the to the poster. So yeah, so the graphic design of this is quite different in so much as there is much less language here and much greater reliance on the visuals. In this case, the graphs, posters, and even a picture that are again kind of organized in ways to draw attention to those visuals in different ways. Maya notes that it has a clear message. Thank you, Maya. That's exactly, and we did not pay Maya to write that, but that is exactly right on point. So it's very clear. It's much clearer from the original poster. What the reader or the viewer is supposed to learn from the poster. And again, the title is more dynamic here, right? And again carries more of the message. And then obviously what we learned is not sort of hidden down on the bottom of the poster, but is really much higher and much more easily read. Any other thoughts about what's sort of maybe a little different here? All right. Well, a couple other things I wanted to mention is that not only do we edit some of the text, but so there's much less writing on it. We also took out some of the sections of the paper. So we took out the data collection and the disability outcomes and some of the statistical analysis, et cetera, and we translated the summary into what we learned. So there is a lot of there's a lot less stuff. A lot fewer sections, and that's enabled us to, again, focus on the more visual aspects of the poster. And, in fact, the graphs, when Tom told me about the science that he was doing here, this enables you to focus on the graphs that he thought were the most important, which were these two. Which were really much more helpful than these other ones as well. Now, some of the stuff that we took off the poster, Tom actually put in a handout, and so if there are things that you think that are important for some audiences, but actually seem to be interfering with your communication, you can always do that. Let's see. E.J. Choi writes, my major is social work and usually don't have a lot of graphs to show. I usually put a table in a poster, but do you have any other suggestions to make a poster more visual? So, first of all, there's nothing wrong with a table, but you want to think about the tables. You know, the tables here have a lot of different information on it, and I can't tell from this table which of the pieces of information are most important. So that's really helpful to think about. So as you create a table, to use maybe a different font or a different color or a different size typeface to really draw attention to the parts of the table that are most interesting, and that certainly creates something that's more visually interesting. The second thing you can do is that if you don't have graphs, obviously the photograph is another way of kind of creating visual interest. And finally, and I'll show some of these posters in a little while, and that they come from the social work field. A number of folks use schematics that kind of demonstrate their sort of model or their theory in ways that are very helpful as well. So that's certainly something that a number of ways that you can make the poster more visually interesting. And I guess finally, the one thing that I guess Crystal noted, that there's a sort of a catchy title. So, when bad things happen to older people, there's sort of a little bit of wit involved there, and it's more than a simple sort of paper-sounding title, and it suggests that there's a little bit of personality here that might be kind of, and that the person sort of standing in front of the poster might be interesting to talk to, or might be worth hanging around with for a few minutes during the course of the poster session. Now, of course, you don't want to, like the picture of the guy in the Viking outfit. You don't want to have something that's so catchy or so kind of cute that it distracts from the scientific rigor of your poster. But again, trying to find something that is at least declarative, that says what you've learned and what people should learn from the poster, is a way of allowing people, as they're walking by from 6 feet or 8 feet, to kind of see at a distance and very quickly sort of what the poster is about, and to make a choice. And because this is the other thing, is that as a consumer of posters, we know that as we're walking by, we're constantly choosing about whether to stop or not stop. And again, by putting the information high and the important sort of message parts of the poster high on the poster, that enables folks to see very quickly whether this is the poster that they should stop at. And again, it prevents, from your point of view, from the poster presenter's point of view, it prevents the wrong people from stopping, because the worst thing that can happen is that you have some person who, is kind of who wants to stop and talk with you, but is actually not part of the target audience that you've identified. And while you're having that conversation, 2 or 3 of the people who you really would like to talk to, see that you're otherwise engaged, and then kind of walk past the poster. So again, putting that information up towards the top of the poster can be really helpful, and can make a big difference in ensuring that you're engaging the right people, the audience, in fact, that you're trying to engage or attract. So again, that gives you a kind of an example, and again, a first example of how we went about putting together a poster, that's more strategic and that's more message-driven. The next part of the session, and again, we have about a half hour here, and I think we should have plenty of time to talk about the 3 posters that folks have presented or sent to us in advance. And so I'd like to have, I guess, start with Carrie. And I know, I'm not sure if Carrie Gibbons, I'm hoping Carrie Gibbons is on the phone, to kind of tell us a little bit about her objective here and what she's been trying, who your audience is, and sort of what your objective is. And if hopefully we'll be able to hear you. If not, maybe you can type that in and I'll read it. It would be better if we could hear you. Sorry, no phone. Okay. Well, Carrie, if you could, why don't we go to the next person, And if it's possible, why don't you type up your objective and a description about what you're trying to achieve in the poster, and then we'll come back and we'll get people's feedback on it, okay? So when we go to the next poster, and this is Gene Gaines. Gene, are you there? I don't know if Gene's there either.
Hi, John. I actually don't see Gene on our participant list.
I don't either, so we're going to go.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do then, I guess to start our discussion here, is for folks to take a look at this poster. It's a little hard. Again, it's helpful when people can give us some feedback on it and I mean, can give us some background or context on it. But why don't we start here and again, this poster came to us in black and white. It didn't come to us in color, so I can only imagine there's probably color to it, and certainly would certainly be helpful. And thank you, Ann, for noticing that. What else? What kind of feedback would you have for this person, and what do you like about it, and sort of what do you think that Gene might do to make it a more effective poster? All right, Anna said she'd like to see some more interesting visuals, the photos. I think that's probably a good point. That's a good point. I think the color might make a difference as well. Bernadette writes that she likes that it doesn't have too much text. I really agree with that, Bernadette. I think a lot of posters have again a good deal of text on it, and this at least is spread out. And again, I think the one thing I would say is that I would to make it a little bit more readable, and because there isn't as much text, I might try to make the text a little bit bigger so that it might be easier to see the text from a distance. Carrie writes what the main conclusion is. I agree. I think we have the discussion down here. The main conclusion is that depression is significantly associated with successful aging, and resiliency is significantly associated with successful aging, and ultimately older adults with similar signs of depression but higher levels of resiliency were more likely to have higher ratings of successful aging. So that resiliency is sort of an important sort of protection or bulwark against depression, resiliency was a mechanism towards which even people with depression could be successful in their aging. So again, I think I agree. I would like to have that higher in the poster. There's the title is a good sized font, as Laura I guess Ledoux writes, and David Burns notes as well. And I think again it gets to the concept quickly. But I think it would be better if this could actually talk more directly, to the audience and says sort of what it is that Gene has learned through this research. Any other comments about this? Perhaps I had a photo of an older person looking sad. Thank you, Bernadette. Again, I think creating a little bit more visual interest would be helpful, certainly. I think in general the poster is actually quite nicely designed, and again, I think there's a lot of nice things about it. I think the thing I like about it is again this graph, which should reflect, and again these tables that really reflect visually what the poster is about, have a place of honor, if you will, in the poster. Again, I'd like to make them bigger. I'd like to call them out a little bit further so that they are the first thing that people really see. And I would certainly like to have that message a little bit more clearly conveyed. I think that would be very helpful, certainly as well. Well, great. So anything else before we go back to Carrie's poster? Excellent. So let's go back to Carrie's poster. Carrie writes her target is family physicians and caregiver researchers. Okay. The main message is we need to find out more about family physician interactions with caregivers. Okay. Great. So, folks, so again, I'd like to open it up now to folks and things that folks liked about this and things that we might be able to, things that perhaps Carrie could think about in a subsequent iteration of this poster.
John, I'll also just mention that Carrie had also written in that her objective was to get feedback from professionals in the field, for example, family physicians.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I missed that. That's right. Thank you very much. So the objective was, again, to get that feedback. Great. Let's see. So let's see. So there's a couple of comments here about the bars on the bottom. So there's a lot. So there are a lot of bars on the bottom. It feels like there's too much information that sort of, and so it should be simplified. Now, of course, it's harder to read the poster in this format than it would be generally, but I would certainly agree that there are there's a lot of information, and again, it's a little unclear from a very quick. A very quick look at the poster, sort of what this graph particularly is saying, and what the sort of the survey results sort of really mean. And so, again, there are a lot of ways that you might think about presenting the data, but I think and again, I think even Maya's noted here that the colors and the visuals are very appealing. But really focusing on the parts of the graph that are the most important, and maybe simplifying that would really be helpful. Let's see. Yeah. So that any other comments, things that folks liked about the poster, things that seem to work. And again, I think folks, there's another comment here about the words on the graph require you to tilt your head. Again, so this again points to the challenge of presenting your data in a way that's really visually effective. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about a website called bandwidthonline.org, bandwidth, the word online.org, which is presented by the John A. Hartford Foundation. And there's actually a section there on data. There's a little navigation on the left side, and there's a number of tutorials about how to present data effectively. Laura suggests perhaps a pie chart instead that might be effective. One of the things that I really like about this poster is having the sort of the what we learned on the top here. And again, I think it enables us to kind of very quickly focus on sort of what it is that Carrie wants us to know about the poster. And I think that, and again, it also has a sort of a nice sort of balance in terms of sort of the graphic design. I think in general, there's sort of the main sort of message I would sort of leave you with, Carrie, is sort of that less is probably more. Certainly sort of less information in terms of the poster here. Perhaps even less, a little bit less text in these sections, so that you can make the text a little bit better. And even in the title, trying to figure out a title that's a little punchier or snappier might be helpful as well. But I think this is, and again, I like the sort of the visualness of the poster, and particularly the use of the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And so I feel like it actually, if those areas in particular could be organized a little bit more effectively, I think you'd have a really, really powerful poster, and one that's very visually compelling. Carrie, any sense of any thoughts from the presentation that you would, and from any of the feedback that you want to reflect on, or any other comments from anybody else in the conference? All right. Well, Carrie, thank you for sharing this. And hopefully the feedback that you've gotten is helpful and can help you on the way in terms of your next poster. Carrie, thanks very much for the feedback. It's just what I needed to hear to make changes. I think, yeah, and I think sometimes we know what it is instinctively that we want to do, and I think one of this, communications often is better done in a team, and again, getting feedback from your colleagues and friends can help you kind of, you have an instinct, yeah, maybe there's a little bit too much information on this poster, but, actually hearing it from others and then, kind of working with in an iterative fashion, just like we did with Tom Gill, can really help you get to something that works much better. All right, let's look at one other poster that we received. This is from Yunchi Choi, and I'm not sure if she is here. She is. Why don't it would be great if you can just say hello or type something in. We have EJ Choi. I'm not sure if EJ and Yunchi is the same thing, same people. Let's see. EJ, that's your poster. Excellent. So, so tell us. Do you have any? Can you speak on the phone? If not, just type in a couple words to tell us a little bit what you're trying to achieve here. And in the meantime, folks can take a look and think about sort of what they like about the poster, and sort of how they might think about doing this differently. All right, so she's going to type in. Bernadette writes, and again, we'll get to your EJ. You'll keep typing in so we get a little bit of background on it. So Bernadette likes the short key message at the end. The key message there. Okay, very good. Colors are easy on my eyes. Photos add interest. Color box is attracted to my eye. Key message is nice. It's a nice section. And again, Laura actually says she too likes the key message and helps draw my eyes to what she concluded. So. And Carrie writes that it flows in a logical order. In fact, that's exactly right. It goes from introduction, research aims, theoretical framework, methods, etc. But it's very much like a regular poster. And again, it has the traditional parts of the message, if you will, in the conclusion, the key message section. But it does have a very nice sort of logical sort of flow to it. I would say that when we presented the poster with Tom Gill, a number of the older people, the older, more experienced researchers that saw it didn't like the fact that we had what we learned on the very top, because they had spent years, in some cases 3 or 4 decades, looking at posters where the conclusion and all the good stuff was in this part of the poster. So we're not dogmatic about having the what we learned on the top, but it does if you are and if you are looking at a more more experienced sort of audience, that might actually make more sense to try to have the conclusion and the message here. Let's see, Maya likes the mix of the visuals, and again, there are a number of different visuals, but they don't sort of overwhelm the poster too, and so your eye isn't drawn, it's really drawn first and foremost here, and then we have a couple of smaller pictures there. And again, and Bernadette writes that it's helpful to have the analysis table that have bullets next to it summarizing what's in the table. And again, I think that's very helpful too, so that you don't, so it does actually call out sort of what you're learning from that visual in a very nice way. So let's see. So EJ, do you have anything you can type? We've gotten some good feedback already. I'm wondering if you're going to tell us a little bit about your objective and your audience. So Laura writes that she wonders if a different font make it a little bit more readable. And in fact, I think part of the reason it's not readable is the interface here. It's not that it looks like Times Roman. Although I will say that in generally in large sizes, it does make more sense to use what's called a sans serif font like Arial or Helvetica or something like that. Than it is to use something with serifs, which are those little tails at the end of the letters, like a Times Roman or a Georgia. That might be helpful. A couple things to think about as we go forward. And again, I'm hoping you're going to give us you're going to give us a little bit about what you're trying to achieve here, and so that will help in just a second. But in the meantime, I like the use of the question up here. I would try to. I think it's pretty readable. Although one thing that we do try to warn people against is this kind of gradient, because what is very readable in the top actually becomes much less readable here at the bottom. So I would probably try to use something that's more that's more consistent and darker color if you're going to use the dropout white. The second piece is that I know you have this is sort of nicely sort of fit together at this point, and again I really like the bullets and the sort of the amount of text that's on the slide. It really makes it really feels like the right amount. But I would love to have sort of the key messages or the results, and particularly at the beginning of the results and both tables sort of starting here at the top, and maybe creating a conclusion and key message section down a little lower, and then maybe even in a different color to draw attention to it than the other pieces of the poster. And finally, I guess the one thing I would also think about is whether whether these are actually big enough, and whether you'd want to make the analytic model a little bit bigger, given what you're trying to achieve. Now, again, the analytic model may or may not be important to your poster, and if it is important, it should have this point of honor in the poster. If it's less important, again, I would try to make that smaller, and again, get the results, the conclusions, and the key message higher in the poster, and make those bigger if you can. So I think that's sort of the feedback I would give. Is there anybody else who would want to add anything to that, or EJ, is there anything you wanted to type in or say? Right. I hope we didn't lose EJ. She's still there. I'm not sure. Well, great. So let's see. Did I get something? Nope. So okay. Well, anyway, that's I think I kind of gives people a good sense of the feedback. And again, I think I want to thank the three folks who sent in their posters, Unchi, Carrie, and Jean Gaines, to allow us to kind of have this discussion. I think one of the things that we've learned is that posters are very difficult from a graphic design point of view, and seeing other examples can be really helpful. And in fact, I want to move past this. I'll come back to this in just a second. In fact, there are a number of posters on bandwidthonline.org, the website I just mentioned, that is really that can be really helpful. And in fact, I'll just type in the web address right now, and I'll show it in just a second. But I'll show a couple other posters here, and I wonder if folks have any reactions to the posters that I'm starting with the one here that I'm showing. What you like, what you might be what you might do a little differently. Yeah, it's a little dense. Thanks, Bernadette. There is a lot of information on that poster. Shorten the title. Yep, always a good idea. And I agree with David that the font size is a little too small. And again, I would definitely try to cut the text down. What I do like is the use of the sort of what we learned in these three different sort of boxes, which really do grab your attention and point you to the most important part of the poster. And I also like this the use of this graph here in a way, so that. And again, while there's other information here that it's sort of fighting with, I would make this a little bigger. But I think again, it does highlight the results in a way that's very, very helpful. So actually, let's go to this next one here. Laura asked, do we need references at the bottom? If not, it allows more room. You don't always need references at the bottom. And in fact, you can see this poster here by Laida Aravelo Plejas. That doesn't have any references. You may want to have those on on a separate sheet of paper that can be helpful, as can other, again, other, you might even use a separate sheet of paper that has a small version of the poster. What do folks think about this poster? Anything you like? All right. So they like the title, but the subtitle should be a smaller font. Bernadette writes it's an engaging title. Jessica notes that it's a little too text-heavy. I think that may be true, although it's actually a very big poster, so there's not. It's text-heavy, I think, in the schema. The diagram is very complex, but again, it may be. That may be necessary given the complexity of the schema. Let's see. The title, the subtitle might need to be a little smaller. Text needs to be larger in the graphic. That I think is probably right as well. All right. So that kind of gives you another option. Again, all of these posters are up on bandwidthonline.org, and you can download them and actually use them as templates in your work. This is another version of the Tom Gill poster that we did. And I wonder if there are folks that are any reactions to this more sort of highly stylized design. Some of the don't worry, there's less of there's less information here than there would normally be, but that was a problem with the design. So I'm sorry, it's bandwidthonline.org. Ann's asking that. I'm sorry. bandwidth.online.org. Laura likes this, but preferred the one with pictures better. And in fact, I think ultimately Tom Gill liked the one with pictures better too. So you're not alone. But it does show a different way of using sort of putting your message in a paragraph there. Maya asks, should we consider the types of colors to use in design? Example, people who are colorblind can't see red and green. I think you want to find that's one consideration. I think you should certainly consider types of color. The key is to really make sure that the contrast is good, and that and again, you're ensuring that things are easily visible from a distance. Now, and again, in so much as there are a number of people that indeed are colorblind, and using red and green, you may need to use red because of or green because of your school colors, etc. So you may not be able to make those kinds of choices. But again, trying to find colors that again are easy on the eyes and can be seen by a wide variety of folks certainly makes sense. Here's a poster from Suzanne Prevost from Middle Tennessee State University. Any feedback on this? Laura likes this one very much. I like this one very much as well. There's a really nice sort of use of sort of the amount of text. They have a picture here to kind of create an emotional connection. We have a very declarative message. End-of-life care in nursing homes is improving. Thank you very much. And again, these graphs are very simple and easy to read. And again, you even have a conclusion section here on the bottom. So it's very traditional in some ways, but again, clear, easy to read, and again, demonstrates that that this person, that Dr. Prevost is, and Dr. Wallace are clear thinkers, I think, and that it would be very safe to kind of stop and have a conversation with them because likely they're able to kind of communicate quickly and get their message across quickly, and then you'd be able to move on to the next poster. Here's a mixed methods poster from Catherine Sarkeesian, which has both a geriatrician at UCLA, which has both the what we learned section and again a graph around which she's designed the poster. It not only has the graph is not only there, but then there are also sort of major themes that are kind of complement to this to the visual or to the graph that takes up a good deal of room in the poster. Again, this uses a black background. Again, a lot of good contrast here. Let's see. Ann Mahoney says, do I have to be a member to log on to see these? I am on the site now. So no, Ann, you do not have to log on. You can just go and click on them and get them. The images, you do need to be a member to log on, for just to download the images. But everything else is open to everyone. All right. So this is another poster here. Here's a very good poster from Elena Boop from the University of Michigan. And what I like about this is that this is actually a pre-doctoral. She was a pre-doctoral scholar at the point. This not finished her dissertation. And again, she uses I think a very nice structure to kind of set up the paper here, describe the sort of the theoretical underpinnings and the policy context, for home care, and then actually does have some preliminary findings that she's able to reflect. Okay, and again, this sort of sets up. I think the title and the subtitle do a nice job of setting up that work. We have another poster from the Oregon Health Science Center. And again, I think a nice job here with the what we learned, and kind of pulling that very, very much to the top. Again, would love a title that was a little bit more declarative, but also like the use of this pink background, a very subtle little pink background to sort of draw attention to the most important sort of visual elements in the poster. Here we have discussion. The discussion is really the sort of on some level a description of the results. And again, so again, it and the what we learned occupy a place of a primary place on the poster that is useful. In general, one thing I will say is that one of the things I'm not crazy about in this poster is the use of these light blue backgrounds. In general, there's a comment about the colors that we might work with. In general, you're really trying to use as high a contrast as possible, and these sort of light color backgrounds, even the light color backgrounds, are not as good in terms of visibility as white backgrounds or even black backgrounds with white text. And here's another poster again of a social work fellow who is developing her dissertation. Again, I think it's a nice job using a sort of a very sort of unique design to, and an interesting title and subtitle, but basically, a very straightforward sort of description here of the background aim methods, et cetera, and then a very nice use of a graphic to kind of just demonstrate the underpinnings or the theoretical underpinnings or model upon which her research and her methods are based. Again, all of these are available on Bandwidth Online. Here's another sort of different color use here with a kind of a different, interesting kind of green. Again, not crazy about the background color in terms of the contrast here, but it does, when you can see, the white really does jump out here very nicely, and the use of graphic design helps us kind of read across the poster around sort of the current elements of practice, the critique, and then the implications for research and practice in terms of the use of these neutrophils in neutropenic older adults with cancer. So again, it gives you a nice sort of kind of again a unique way of kind of breaking down a poster, and something that's quite different and dramatic. Will certainly got people to stop when Margaret put that poster together. And finally, here's a poster that I'm not exactly, it's not traditional in any way, shape, or form, but again points to some of the fact that there's a lot of ways that you can break a poster down or design a poster. I think the text here is actually too great, and I would certainly, there's too much text there, and I would certainly want to have the results and the conclusions much easier to read. But it does suggest sort of, again, the way you can use graphics to kind of bring people in and to teach people very quickly, or to engage people very quickly in the subject area that you're about to take a look at, or you're trying to communicate about. Excuse me. So I've got a couple of poster takeaways here. Before we get to those, do we have any kind of last questions here? We're getting down to 3:30. I'm able to stay on with folks if you want after 3:30, but again, for the folks that are expecting an hour and a half, I want to be cognizant of all of your time and to let you get to the next thing. But are there any additional questions that folks have before I do my wrap up here? So what's the best medium to put the information on the poster board? Well, for the most part, let's see, Laura Ledoux asked that question. I would say the best medium, the easiest one that we found is PowerPoint. And although you can use, if you have sort of InDesign or a graphic design program, that can also be useful as well. Those are generally more complex and also generally more expensive. But I would say PowerPoint is probably the best medium. Anne-Marie asked, would you know of any places we can go to get free graphics photos? So, well, there are a couple places. One is the Creative Commons. There are photos there, and perhaps like on Wikipedia, they oftentimes use Creative Commons photos, and you just have to use photos with the proper attribution. Bandwidth Online does have photos, some of which are free, some of which are very relatively inexpensive. If you are a grantee of the John A. Hartford Foundation, we can get you a password for that, and just send me your information, and I will get you that password. And get you images that way. iStockphoto.com is also a very good place to get low cost, $1, $2, $3 photos, although if you're really going to print posters, you need sort of high resolution versions of those photos, and so you may need to spend a little bit more money to get those. And in fact, a lot of the Creative Commons photos that I described are generally sort of more appropriate for PowerPoint presentations or for websites and things, electronic uses, than they are for printing a poster, because if you don't have very high quality, then it will kind of become blurry or pixelated if it's not a high enough what's called dots per inch. And finally, Carrie Stewart asked, do you have any specific advice for presenting qualitative data on the poster? Well, I mean, I think what you want to do is to really identify sort of your key themes, and to make sure that those key themes are the things that you can draw people's attention to, with a couple of explanatory quotes that come from that, and trying to create, again, just sort of visually interesting sort of boxes or tables that can, again, draw folks' attention to the qualitative information is usually very helpful. I think the most important thing is to, again, it's not you can't get to a graph or a table or something very easily with a poster. People do have to come and see what it is that people have said in the actual qualitative data. But that said, I think if you can think about sort of what your key takeaway messages are and what the key themes of the research are, that can help to organize the poster, help people see generally what it is you're talking about, and then if they're interested, they can come and then get a little closer to the poster to read the actual quotes or qualitative data that you have. All right, those are great questions. Before we kind of break here, I just do want to, kind of leave you with a few takeaway messages, if you will. First of all, to be strategic, take the time to figure out your objective, your audience, and your message, and to use that thinking, that intellectual capital, as a foundation for deciding what it is that goes on your poster and how you design that poster. Second, remember, it's a competitive environment. People are moving around. You need to compete and get people to stop at your poster. So do what you have to do that visually with the poster, and ensure that, again, the key messages are described easily and can be seen from a distance. Third, it's about the conversation, and again, this is to the fourth point as well about practicing your presentation. It's really not about sort of getting a great poster up there. The poster is sort of the visual sort of background for what you hope to be a series of very productive and interesting conversations. So you really want to not only get the poster up there, but you want to practice the conversation or practice the presentation or your elevator speech, the 30 seconds that you're going to say at the beginning when people come by and say, so tell me a little bit about your poster. And you want to have that 30 seconds sharp, you want it compelling, and you want to draw people in, and particularly the right people in, so that they will stick around and ask the questions that create a kind of an interesting sort of interaction. And then from a design point of view, again, think about your message first. Find the visual manifestation of the message, whether it's a table, a graph, a photograph, or something else, and then just use make that as big as you can, and design visually around that message as best you can. To make that happen and make the posters work, you really do want to kind of edit ruthlessly and keep your type sizes very, very large so that folks can read them. You want to get design help. These are, posters are a complex visual challenge, and most of you and most of us do not have the same kind of training that enables us to take on that challenge. I took a year of graphic design, in fact, when I was an undergraduate, and at the end of the year, after a full year, they allowed us to design something that was 18 inches by 24 inches. Okay, and you folks are just jumping into things that are 32 by 48, or 30 by 40, or 40 by 60, or even 40 by 80, and that creates a lot of challenges. So it's really important to get some design help, and hopefully in advance, and don't back down. Really try to test the format's limits and really figure out the best way to communicate, given the environment, the audience, your message, and what it is you're trying to achieve. If you're looking for more help, you can sort of call or write me at SCP. I'll give you my address in just a second. You can go to bandwidthonline.org, and there's a How Do I section, and you can a drop down that says Create an Effective Poster, and click there. You can engage graphic designers in your school or your university or school publications office, or even work with a graphic design class to use your poster as a project. And again, that's in just a number of ways that you can get ideas for doing a stronger, more effective poster. So I'm going to take a breath now. If folks have any additional questions, I can stay on the phone for the next few minutes. If not, thank you all very much for your kind attention, and we'd be happy to. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have emails, please feel free to write me, for those questions as we go forward. So again, thank you. Have a great afternoon, and hopefully I will see you all at GSA. Julia, anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's great. Thanks, John. We actually have a lot of thank yous coming in from folks in the audience today. It was clearly a very helpful presentation, and like I said, it's being recorded, so you can refer back to it. I would also encourage you all to follow up with John. Take him up on his suggestion to email him. You see his email address here on the screen, and John, you've just been such a wonderful research to the Hartford Geriatric Social Work Initiative, and I know to nurses, and I'm just so delighted that now we have a brand new audience here today that's gotten to hear this message.
Right. That's great. Let's see if are there any other, mostly just thanks. So good. So if folks have any questions, please feel free to write or call. And again, we look forward to seeing you all at GSA.
And thanks, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and close out our presentation for today. Thank you.